Most of us learned a distorted history of slavery in school. So as white Americans, most of us don't realize our connection to it. Here's a quick rundown of historical facts I had not been taught. That the North was deeply implicated, that slavery was legal in northern states for over 200 years, that Northerners up and down the economic spectrum made their livings in businesses tied to slave trade and slavery, that Northern mills processed cotton harvested by enslaved people. The Midwest and the West were implicated. They grew food to feed the South, where land was devoted to cash crops like cotton, harvested by the enslaved. Consumers throughout the country were implicated in their everyday purchases of clothing, coffee, sugar, rice, tobacco. People who immigrated from Europe after slavery were implicated. I have Irish, French, and German immigrant ancestors who came to the United States in the 19th century, worked in factories, struggled, but they were given access to the American dream. Why were waves of immigrants flocking here? Because it was the land of opportunity. Why was the economy booming? Why were there jobs? Because it had been built largely on unpaid labor.
Wagwan, black people have their own history, but they always tell us our history starts from the day of slavery and colonization. The question is, they all learn our history, they have written down about black people history, but do we really know the history of white people? Do we really read on schools the history of white people? No. Because the video I'm going to talk today is about white people learning their history. And they are learning their history the hard way because they all have been using history of black people.
Look, boys and girls, the only reason there are white people is because black people came here first. And they faded as they moved farther and farther north from the equator. Their melanin faded so that their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. Their brains didn't get smaller, but their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. That's the only reason you children can call yourselves white. And you aren't white. We are all shades of brown.
Grand Rising Kings and Queens. First of all, much love and gratitude to every single one of you tuning in today. And thank you so much for supporting the truth and for seeking knowledge and for standing tall in your power. Today's video is not about hate. Every time we don't support hate. It's not about revenge, but it's about the truth. Because what we are witnessing right now in 2025 or recent days is something that black people have been warning about for generations. And right now, it is out here. The white people are learning their history the hard way. Let that sink in. Now, this commentary is deep, and I'm diving into what happens when a system or the entire people choose to ignore warnings, cover the truth, write history, and silence the very voices trying to help them. And before we go down in that video, I want you to watch these clips. This clip, the white people trying to know their history, to educate themselves. First of all, let's watch this one and then we come back.
Gotta stop you right there, Deputy Crow. Before I jump into this, I'm gonna explain to you what you just said. You've never been called that, and where you're from, it's not a thing. It's not a thing for you where you're from. You can look through this playlist for a video called Decentering, and that might help. We can come back to that if we need. The reason we're here today is you made a list of ways you like to mess with civilians while you're doing your job as a public servant.
This is gonna piss you off. So much fun. You know, we pass each other like such. I like to hit my brakes. Get the blood flowing. You know what I'm talking about? Really, I'm helping you out, if you think about it. Figured I'd let you in on a couple of fun things that I like to do. Are we just fucking with you?
Also, it was really gross that later on, after you took the videos down, you said, I took the videos down personally, they didn't win.
No, I didn't get fired. No, they didn't win.
So let's talk about the history of your job. You chose this job, and in America there are 700 to 800,000 people who do that job every day. Ish. Hard to keep track, you guys won't hold still when we count. Now that being said, I'm sure there are dozens of good ones. You probably think you're one of the good ones, don't you? Let's just jump back in time to what your job originated as, okay? In 1865, Ish. Again, America's real lax with this kind of history and dates, so. Your job used to either be patrols or catchers. That was your job. Ultimately, it morphed into what you do today as a living. Here's what some of those responsibilities were. Your job was to capture runaways, to prevent revolts, to enforce laws restricting enslaved people's movements. That is what your job was at its core when it started. It didn't even have the title that it has today until around 1838 in Boston, where the very first change happened, let's call it. It was modeled after the British system, which really just started a few years earlier in 1829. This was really the change from it being volunteer and informal to publicly funded and organized. 1845 rolls around, New York gets their first one. 1851 rolls around, Chicago gets its first PD. Probably notice there's some in-between time between 1865 and 1838, right? So it didn't become this role until 1865. This was really the start of the formality in 1838, but there was some lead time in between there where it started to kind of take shape. Things take time. Let's blow past that to 1865, where we get what's called Act Codes starting. During what's called the Reconstruction era, it was your job to enforce these black codes. You might be wondering what a black code is. Don't worry, I had time. A couple examples were curfews. It was your job to enforce curfews, specifically for black people, hence the name. Also, yearly labor contracts. African Americans were often required to sign yearly labor contracts to white landowners or their employers. If they refused or failed to fulfill the contract, they would be fined or forced into unpaid labor. It was also the job to prohibit occupations of certain types for certain people. Again, we're talking about black codes specifically. I'll let you guess what people we're talking about. It was your job to prevent land ownership, specifically limits to land ownership that people could have if they were African American. Vagrancy was another thing. It was your job to enforce vagrancy. This one here is called apprenticeship, and it might be the most sinister. African American children who became orphans were forced into labor. It was their job to go to work, and it was your job to enforce that. Fast forward to the mid-1800s, we move to what's called Jim Crow era, where you enforce more things. It's your job to enforce the suppression of boating. Speaking of that, make sure you go to this website here and make sure your boating registration is still active. It's also your job to suppress civil rights protests. Hear that. It was your job to stop people from trying to get rights that are civil rights. It was your job to stop that. I know, you're one of the good ones, I heard. One more of the things was racial etiquette. It was your job to enforce people to yield to whites on the sidewalk and to address white people with proper deference. I had to look up what deference means. You ready? It is to speak to someone with humble submission and respect. Now, all of that being said, if you can't see why messing with people is so far away from the necessities of your role or the need as a person who is white to correct the actions of other whites, specifically these because it's the job you chose, then I don't know what to tell you, man. You don't seem empathetic in your responses. That's why I DM'd you and told you to turn your comments on. You read it, you didn't. You don't seem sincere in your apology because, again, you said,
No, they didn't win.
and I know Massac County is aware of your actions. I don't know why people keep getting this job and not taking it with all sincerity. You have one of the only jobs where you can do what you just did online and on social media and then still retain employment with that employer. Somebody talks crazy to a customer at McDonald's, they're getting unemployed. Yet you still get to keep your job after not only that video, but making multiple previous videos talking about different interactions you've had with civilians. You need to do better. That's the honest ending to this. You just need to do better. You have extremely problematic responses, you have knee-jerk actions and sentences, which tells me that you're not fully equipped to do the role which you chose. The role that you chose.
So this guy is telling basically how cops started in America as slave patrols and slave catchers, and how, you know, it's different now and this, that, and the other. But my argument would be actually that cops never stopped slavery or slave patrols. They're on slave patrols currently right now. They're doing it every fucking day because America never actually banned slavery. We thought we did, But we didn't. If you actually read the wording, it's right here. It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime wherever or whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So it says, because these are commas, basically might as well be parentheses, but it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the U.S. Except... So that just erases everything. Everything you just said. There shall not be any slavery in America except as a punishment for crime. So for criminals, they'll make a criminal. Which you think that's fine. Who gives a fuck? They're criminals. They're pieces of shit. They're like the bottom of society. They deserve to be slaves because they're criminals. So let me just make sure you keep that thought process, because what happened is after they, let all the slaves go, they freed the slaves or whatever, there was a whole bunch of black people that were just kind of standing around. They didn't really have any place to go or a place to be or a thing to do. They didn't own property. They didn't have a job. So they didn't have a place to sleep at night. So they would just kind of stand around and chill. So guess what they did? They invented a crime called loitering. So whenever you're loitering, which is literally just standing around, minding your own fucking business, standing in a place, all of a sudden that's criminal. Now that's criminal. So you can make that criminal a slave again. So all the black people that were just standing around, that didn't have jobs and didn't have a place to go, didn't have a place to sleep, they just made them all criminals again by saying that they're loiterers. That's exactly what they've done repeatedly. They did it with fucking vagrancy. They've done it with drugs. They've done it with pants sagging. I think it was in North Carolina or South Carolina. They passed a law stating that you're not allowed to show your underwear. And if you do show your underwear at all, then cops have the right to stop you and ask for your ID and do all this other shit to you and search you. Everything. Like a whole... Who the fuck is that attacking? Who is that targeting? You think it's targeting the people that sag their pants a lot? Stop and frisk laws. That was used illegally, or, well, I wouldn't even say illegally. They just fucking used it as a way to be racist. They saw a Hispanic person, they saw a black person, they would go up to them and stop and frisk them. And whether they did something or didn't do anything, doesn't matter. If they saw him for the 20th time, they would still stop that motherfucker and frisk him again. Which is unconstitutional. All of this shit's unconstitutional. I want you to understand that. The broken windows theory that they fucking have done. Broken windows policing. I'm telling you, dude, they do this shit purposefully to make sure that they can continue slavery. Because slavery was never stopped in America. We just changed who the owners were. So the owners of the slaves are now governments. The actual government, whether it's state, federal, local, doesn't matter. City, fucking county. The government owns the slaves. And then they pimp out the slaves to Walmart, AT&T, Victoria's Secret, McDonald's, Whole Foods. That's just 5. I asked for 5 examples and I got 5 examples. I'm pretty sure you could ask for 100 and they would give you 100. These corporations have benefited off of slave labor. They currently, right now in America, benefit of slave labor. We never abolished slavery in America. Every time a cop is putting a person in jail and that person is duly convicted of a crime, they're now a slave. Why do you think that the majority of, or the disproportionality of people that are in prison are black? Because this is still a racist system. Okay, I argue about systemic racism and interpersonal racism all the time because people get those two things very, very confused. And we've done a lot to fix systemic racism in America as well. But the one place that we haven't, because it's still codified into the fucking Constitution and hasn't actually been fixed or amended yet, is slavery. Straight up fucking slavery. Still fucking exists all day, every day. Every single time a cop arrests a person and that person gets duly convicted of a crime, they are now subject to be a slave. So just understand that. Aside from that, there's more slaves in the world today than there ever has been in the history of the world. More alive today than ever before. So if you really hate slavery and you really want to fight against slavery, you can do that right now. Actively. You just don't, because you don't even realize it's happening still. But it is. Almost all of Dubai has been built on slave labor. Look it up. It's pretty fucking easy to find out. Anyways, Unicor, that's another fucking person or another business that benefits off slave labor. Like, they're the ones that actually contract the slaves to the companies to work for them. So just understand all of this. Okay? The other thing that I would want to talk about is, I don't know if you remember who President Richard Nixon is, but one of his aides, or whoever he was at the time, I'm pretty sure it was one of his aides, straight up said that they couldn't arrest people for protesting the Vietnam War because we have freedom of speech in America, right? So instead, they made pot illegal and started the war on drugs so that they can go after and criminalize every single person who does drugs, because their thought process was, oh, the people who are protesting my war, they all seem to smoke weed. So I'm going to legalize pot, and I'm going to make sure that we go after and arrest everybody for pot now. And that's exactly what they did. The same thing with the crack. They literally made sentencing for crack 10 times worse than white powder, because black people were known to do crack while white people were known to do the powder version. It's all written into the system, man. I talk a lot about systemic and interpersonal, like racism, and this is a perfect example of systemic racism. We've done a great job in America of eliminating actual fucking systemic racism, but this is one where we haven't even fucking touched it. We haven't even tried to touch it because it's written into the fucking law, except as a punishment. So, yes, they started off as slave patrols. Yes, they started as slave catchers. I don't think it ever ended. I think today, in 2024, cops are still slave catchers and still fucking slave patrols. That's what they do. So, if you want to argue with me, awesome. Do it down in the fucking comments. I will gladly take on this argument and die on this hill. But, yeah. The position of being a cop isn't something you should be proud of, in my opinion. And again, if 2 bad cops exist and 100 of them see them be bad cops and do nothing about it, then you have 102 bad cops. They say that, there's just a few bad apples, but they never finish that sentence. The finished sentence is a few rotten apples spoils the whole bunch. So, it's a great analogy that they use, but they just forget the rest of the analogy. So anyways, have a good one. I really appreciate you listening if you did.
I can't say that I'm surprised to see this stitch, because I came across his post, if you can recall my video from about 2 weeks ago, and I originally seen the uproar he had caused over on Twitter, and I knew it was just a matter of time, because when I had found his video on this app, he had his stitches turned off, he had the duets turned off, he even had the comments turned off to where you couldn't even leave any kind of remark. But he had already had enough support from his following in the comment sections, and so I went and looked at all of his other videos, and there was an obvious pattern to his content. And I thought to myself, imagine having a position in society where you need to show empathy and concern for your fellow citizens, but instead you choose to harass and poke fun and goof off with your peers and cause more stress to them instead. And so here we are being taught a lesson by a citizen when it shouldn't have been necessary to begin with. But, when people say ACAB or defund the police, it goes over their heads because they don't know what we're talking about. I will say that I believe this position should require more than a 6-month course and a certificate.
Welcome back. For very many years, centuries, black people in America, in Africa, in the Caribbean, across the diaspora, they have been telling the truth. And this truth is about oppression. This truth is about how systems are built. This truth is about stolen labor, stolen land, stolen lives. The truth about what happens when a nation refuses to acknowledge its sins. But on the other hand, the white systems, they didn't buy into this. They dismiss the truth. They call it face baiting or race baiting. They say that that was in past, that we are no longer our ancestors. They created TV shows that romanticized colonization. They tuned slavery into footnote rather than a crime against humanity. Meanwhile, black scholars, black elders, and black freedom fighters were sounding the alarm. People like Malcolm X said a lot. They warned about everything. Angela Davis, Dr. Francis, even our musicians, the hip-hop musicians, hip-hop artists were screaming the truth in their lyrics. You could hear, they said, if you don't deal with the history, it's going to deal with you. But white America, the white Europe, they were not listening to this. Here's the thing. History does not disappear. History, it waits. And if you ignore it for a long, long time enough, it shows up at your front door and it doesn't knock gently. And that's what is happening right now. The very system the white folks thought that will protect them, it is falling apart. The economy is unstable right now. Political trust is collapsing. Social unrest is rising. And young people, even white youths, are questioning everything from capitalism to the white identity itself. We talked about slavery, they dismissed it. Right now it's hunting them back. No, the January 6th, it was a capital riot. That wasn't about patriotism. That was about white panic. The rise of far-right groups, that's fear, okay? The collapse of confidence in democracy, that's the fruit of historical lies. Right now, white people are waking up in a country they even don't recognize, because this country was built in the heart, or it was built through the blood and sweat of black people, but they dismissed that history, claiming that America is great because of them themselves. But no, they're trying to rewrite history, and that is affecting the current generation of white people. There is this, we call what? The black power is rising. We are now shifting powers, and it's confusing some white folks. It's confusing their kids, because the very thing they were told in school, the very thing they were taught, it's not like that. They were not taught about the ancient Egypt, about the Kemet. They were told that white people were the one who discovered everything. You cannot build justice on top of injustice. You can't keep exploiting people without consequences. And black people say that you can't keep killing us and expect peace, And that's why it's a video I said, God of black Americans right now, it's repaying. Right now, the white America is facing the consequences of their own denials. When I go back to history, because I love history, when black people were kneeling during the anthem, they were mocked. When black people protested in the streets, they say that they were rioting. When black people asked for reparations, they said, get over it. And when black people tried to teach history, they banned it from schools. They deleted the history and erased it. But here we are now. Right now, we look at the mess that's going on around. mass shooting nearly every week. Inflation is out of control. Farmers are struggling. The white farmers right now are struggling, and the black people and the minority groups are not willing to work for them anymore because the power is shifting. The earlier they realize this, the better. Young white men right now, they are angry, like blaming everybody else. Them folks didn't just ignore black people, but they mocked black people, and they used black people, and they used us as the warning, but refused to heed the warnings. Now, there is this someone called James Baldwin. He said something. He said the American dream is at the expense of American Negro. He wasn't just making a statement. He was prophesying, and they turned a deaf ear, but now they can't hear the solution. So this isn't just about America. Europe too is learning the hard lesson. The same European nation that colonized Africa, looted its resources, enslaved millions. They're now dealing with the ripple effect, mass migration, terror threats, economic stagnation, racial tension rising. And guess what? Black people told them too about that. Africans warned, stop stealing our resources, stop backing corrupt leaders, stop sabotaging our economy. They did not listen to this. Right now, Africa is rising, and it's rising very fast, and Europe is declining. This scares the system so much because African nations are saying no more. We can hear it from Mali, you can hear it from Burkina Faso, you can hear it all the way to Congo, Kenya. The people are standing up, and the West doesn't know how to respond because the force is too much, and the generation, it is different. It is not the same generation they were saying they did not colonize. So this generation, it is so different because their power of the West was built on black silence, and that silence is over. So they are learning now the hard way, And what happens when the oppressed rise up with clarity and courage? You guess it right. Something interesting is happening. White youths, the white Gen Zs, the younger millenniums are starting to ask questions. Oh my goodness. That is one of the things that makes me happy. My white youths, my white Gen Zs, and my young millennials are asking questions. And we love when they ask questions because they need to get answers from their parents. They are asking, why didn't they teach us this in school? Why were black people demonized? Why are our parents so afraid of the truth? White Gen Zs, the youths, are now realizing they were fed with lies. They are now realizing they were taught to be colorblind instead of being just. They were given privilege, but not purpose. They were given dominance, but not identity. I always tell white people, for example, the working class, the poor white people, that we are all the same. You are oppressed too. They are using you, but you don't know that. We are the same. We are all minorities. Latinos, black people, Asian, white people. We are all minorities, but you don't know that. Right now, the Gen Z, some are rejecting white supremacy outright. I see their ladies are getting married to black people, and they are happy about it. Some are joining black-led movements. Some are even choosing to walk away from whiteness because they realize it was never about skin, but about power and fear. But again, I'll say this. Black people already warned them. And we said it. You are not free either. You don't know it yet. I even talked about it in my videos. I've talked about it. I talk about it. And right now, they are just understanding, and I love it. Understanding is one thing. And realizing that you made a mistake is one thing. And understanding that this mistake was like this is another thing. And then come to think of it, how you going to handle the situation is another thing. Here is something deeper. Black people have a long memory. White systems have deliberate amnesia. Why? Because black communities, they remember the pain because they live in it daily. And white systems are trying to erase the pain because they don't want to deal with it. They don't want their children to deal with it. But memory is power. Knowledge is power. Truth cannot be hidden when the memory is still there. And denial is a source of weakness. And that's why when system crash, black people adapt faster. We have always had to survive without the system. We have always had to create our own happiness, our own schools, to create our own churches as black people, our own economies, our own culture. Meanwhile, those who depended on our systems are crumbling. And now it's falling them or it's failing them. They are panicking because they never had to build resistance. Now they are learning the hard way. When black people already mastered the game. We already know how to play this chess, the football. We know, we have mastered the game. How to survive when the system stands against you, we know that. How to deal with the outcomes that comes with the unemployment, mass incarceration, police brutality, racial inequality. Black people knows how to deal with it, but now the white people who are waking up and opening their eyes, they are now right here trying to understand what to do. The question right now is, what happens next? We need to have solutions. I always say, when I talk, we need to know what can happen next. Do white people continue to play victim, blaming everyone else for their fall of the empire because the empire is falling? Or do they finally humble themselves, listen and join the work of the truth, justice and healing? Because black people are done trying to prove anything. Black people already won. They already sacrificed. Come on, they already led. They already talked about what's happening. Now the movement is about building. Building for self, building in Africa, building in the Caribbean, building online, building new systems where black people or black identity is not a problem, but the blueprint. If others want to learn, they can, but they will have to come correct. They'll have to join us. They'll have to follow the leader because black people are not begging to be accepted anymore. Black people are standing in power unapologetically. And white people are learning their history the hard way because they refuse to hear. They refuse to hear it the easy way. I always say this. We are in a new chapter, and this chapter is about building, reclaiming, and rising. Every black viewer watching this video, you are not crazy, you are not angry, you are not wrong. You knew this day was coming, you knew some things, you knew power will shift, I know that. But now you need to move in confidence. You need to move in confidence. And the other people who are watching too, the choice is yours. You can keep denying the fall of the system. And you can face the truth and the rise with the people. But one thing for sure is that black people already warned you. And now the world is listening. Thank you for watching this video. I know I have a lot to say, but I have a limited time. I'm going to work. Let's meet at that time. Until next episode, peace out.